Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Nashville, it's time for Nashville Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural edition of Nashville Business Radio. I'm John Ray, and we've saved the best for first, folks. Paul Klein is with us. He's with Klein Consulting and better known as the host of the Pricing is Positioning podcast. Paul, it's an honor to have you.
Hey, John, I'm honored to be here on the first episode. Yeah, you know, hey, I'm glad you're expanding into Nashville, being a new resident of the Nashville area. It's awesome that you're coming up here and helping the businesses grow. It's an awesome thing. Well,
thank you for that, and I want to get to why you came to Nashville, because you're a shining example of the kind of talent that Nashville's attracting. But before we get to that, let's give everyone an introduction to you and how you're serving folks out there.
Yeah, my big thing is I really like helping people, especially business entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, freelancers, people in the knowledge economy, those that are getting paid for what they know, consultants, those kinds of things. And I've been one of those since 2009. I've been, W9, K1, leave the cave, kill something, bring it home, or you don't eat, and leaving the secure day job and all that. So I know what it's like to be a freelancer, a solopreneur, and that. I think Forbes said something like 56 million, or almost half the workforce is, especially with COVID now, there's a lot of us out there working from home and having to carve our own path. And one of the things I found in the last 12 years since I went on my own, bidding thousands of jobs and working with big clients like Target, Neiman Marcus, Taco Bell, Dollar General, bidding those jobs and contract negotiations from 4 figures to 6 figures, all those good things. I kind of learned some things. And then I really started reading a lot of the pricing books from Alan Weiss to Blair Enns to, Baker, and just all the value-based pricing books, and really realized, wow, there's some science behind this. So what I love helping people do is get over those mindset hurdles on being able to charge what they're worth and charge for value, and not getting over on people and being dishonest and trying to get the most money out of a client, but truly creating that win-win, or what Rabbi Lapin says in the book, Thou Shalt Prosper, getting certificates of appreciation because you provided a great service, and it creates the win for the client because they need that service. And it's that joint effort that really is the sweet spot. So helping people get into that and going from a, 3 or 4 figure consulting project to a 5 or 6 figure consulting project and those types of clients is a joy of mine.
That's awesome. Now I want to dive deep into that here shortly, but let's at least give a nod to your other current consulting business, because you're still involved in that. Because I get that, as you mentioned, you've worked with some pretty big companies, but why don't you talk specifically about what you do for them? Yeah.
So, going back to 2009, when I was in my dreaded day job, I was 40 years old. I had worked again in that traditional job, just stay here till you're 55 and retire. And it was very much in the architectural, building inspection, construction kind of space. But what I did is I niched down and I became basically an ADA expert. So I said, I want to start my own consulting company. I want to go out on my own. I can't stay in this organization. I'm an entrepreneur stuck in a bureaucracy, and I've got to be able to carve my own path. And so I really looked at what's called the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with California, you know kind of how crazy it is. And one of the cottage industries there was the people that go around suing businesses. And in California, their laws are set up to where if someone has a beef with a business, they can not only sue and get attorney's fees, but they can also sue and get compensatory damages and so forth. So there was a whole need I saw there for helping businesses avoid those types of lawsuits. And so I started just grassroots local businesses in the Sacramento, Northern California area, and grew that over many years. And it wasn't too long after that, I got picked up with Yum Brands, Taco Bell, KFC, Target, JCPenney's, and all of a sudden, next thing I know, after about 3 or 4 years, I'm working with these huge brands. And so I still do that to this day. I have a consulting business, and my niche spot in that is with QSRs. So a lot of, Cracker Barrel and Burger King, those kinds of restaurants, fast food,
sure,
or fast casual is kind of my niche in that space. And then in 2018 is when I pivoted to my podcast and kind of doing some consulting and coaching on the side. So I coach the freelancers or the aspiring consultants that want to go out on their own, and still doing my regular client work.
Now, I wanted to set that up to certainly give a nod to that business for anybody out there that needs those services, but there's a real lesson in what you did there, because niching down, because that's contrary to what a lot of consultants think about their business. They got to keep it kind of broad so they don't exclude anybody, right? And you actually lived through that in your business. I mean, you're talking about niching down to ADA and then further down to quick service restaurants, right?
Yeah. That's really where I'm focused now in that particular space.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started, we were just kind of I was just like an accessibility consultant or an ADA consultant. And, we picked up a lot of different clients from a lot of different verticals, whether it was hotels or restaurants and everything, which is done real well. But I find even niching down within a niche it's really counterintuitive, but it really is. It provides so much clarity. So instead of chasing everything, it's like, hey, I've got my ideal client, and any business can kind of learn from this. It's like, I mean, even if you're in lawn care or dog walking, pick the clients that live in, I guess around here, it might be the Brentwood area, or some one of those really nice neighborhoods, and that's your niche. Go after that, or do window cleaning in that, or roof replacement, whatever it is that you're doing. And really hone in on that ideal client, and then just go all in on that. Doesn't mean you won't pick up other ancillary clients, but the clarity will provide so much around your brand and around your business that it will attract the right clients. And then other people who may not be your ideal client will see that and go, hey, that'll work for me too. And you'll end up getting business too. So that certainly happened with me and my consultancy over the last, 12 years.
Sure. And I guess just talk about the passion that led to getting in the consulting business for consultants around pricing, and maybe some of the issues that you confronted and conquered that led to the passion to teach others.
Yeah, one of the things that's really surprises me, I made the shift early on in my consultancy from billing by the hour. I had been working by the hour as a professional for many years. Then a mid-manager, I was on a salary position where that's where you work as many hours it needs, but you get the same amount of pay. You don't get overtime.
Right.
And managing and babysitting all the staff and the budget and everything. Anyway, that's why I left that corporate organizational space when I was 40, because I had it. But the shift from people that go from an organization or a corporate world or from day job to consulting is they keep that mindset of getting paid by the hour. Well, if you try to bill for every hour as a consultant or a solopreneur, I mean, you're the accountant, you're the marketing agency, and many small businesses, brick and mortar, same thing. You're wearing all kinds of hats. One minute you're the janitor, next minute you're the marketing director. And so you've got to move away from hourly billing and that whole process of being paid for time. And that's one of the biggest things most people get caught up on, is they think that they can only charge for their time. And the more difficult a job is or a profession is, the higher you should be paid. It's like, no, you're getting paid for your expertise. We're in this knowledge economy, as Drucker said. And I mean, we're kind of in the dawn of it, but I mean, really it's that whole idea about, identifying what your clients' outcomes and desires are, what their true end result is with your brand, and helping them achieve that. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. I mean, if you've got to go to John, if you've got to go to the doctor for a toothache, you don't care if it takes, 5 minutes or 10 hours. You just want that toothache fixed, that pain to go away. And so, you almost pay anything if it's a root canal or whatever. Yep. It doesn't matter how long the doctor takes to fix it. You just want it fixed, and you want it fixed now. And so that's one of the biggest mindsets, shifting from being time and materials and being paid for your expertise and the value you bring to your clients and their outcomes. That's a big one.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you teach a lot about value, and that's what you're talking about there is value, and what's the interplay with value and pricing in terms of the way you look at it?
Yeah. First thing is value is very subjective. So it means different things to different people. And what's valuable to, my son will pay $300 for a pair of LeBron James sneakers, and, I'll go to Payless and pay $5 or $10 for something just to get me by. Yeah. So value is very subjective, but at the end of the day, and there's things like called value-based pricing, or value outcome-based pricing, those kinds of things. And the whole idea is that it's identifying what your product or service brings to your clients and delivering it to them with excellence. And then also, no matter what, the value of the price that you charge can never be more than the value that you're providing your clients, or at least in their minds. So they have to be getting more value than what they're paying for. So, for instance, you would never charge $20,000 for a 1979, Gremlin. But if I said you could have a McLaren, or a Bentley for $20,000, well, the value or the perceived value of that car is so much greater. So it's all about identifying that value to your clients and then making sure that the value that they're getting is so much higher and greater than what they're paying. And there's so many different things you can carve up underneath value. You look at what people pay to take little Johnny and Sally to Disneyland on their 10th birthday. That's an experience. It only happens once in a lifetime, or a prom, those kinds of things. So if your products and services are wrapped around those kinds of experiences, well, then you can identify those and charge a more premium price, because you're not just going to the carnival in the parking lot at Target. You're going to Disneyland at Disney World. It's a much higher value, and positioning your brand and your services around that instead of. And what happens in most people is they commoditize themselves. They just say, they compete on price, and it's usually the lowest price and they're just being regarded as a commodity. And that's just the quickest way to the bottom.
Yeah, for sure. Folks, we're here chatting with Paul Klein. Paul is the host of the Pricing is Positioning podcast on all your major podcast applications. And, he's also a consultant and teacher. We've got some more information coming up on that, on the work he does with consultants and freelancers and coaches and what have you. Paul, I'm address the question about pricing what I'm worth, because you hear a lot about that, right? I want to get what I'm worth versus pricing value to what the client perceives.
What I'm worth. Well, let's
those are two different things sometimes, right?
Yeah. And most of the time, it's your mindset that prevents you from getting those higher rates. Mm-hmm. It's your own mindset or self-limiting beliefs. It's like, I've worked with people, and I even struggled this with myself. It's like, man, I can't charge that. I mean, that's obscene. But I've seen it on the other side where the client is going, no, that's a great value. I mean, I'll pay that all day, So that's a big thing that people have to get with is not selling to your own wallet or what you perceive to be value, but what it is to the clients, and being able to dive into that. I mean, because at the end of the day, the first sale is to yourself. Alan Weiss from $1 Million Consulting. I mean, that's one of his great lines that I use all the time is the first sale is truly to yourself. If you don't believe you're worth it, you'll never get that. So if you're struggling with those higher values or rates and so forth, and you're hitting yourself against a brick, hitting a brick wall in your fees or your rates, there's probably some underlying deep belief that you're not worth it, or, you're just this kind of consultant. There's really not as much value there. The imposter syndrome. What I do is just anybody could do. And the other component to that is so many times, if you're a CPA or an accountant or, branding specialist, whatever it is, you look at other people and you think, oh, well, they're so great. And then you look at yourself and go, well, this comes really easy to me. Therefore it must be not as valuable as I think it is because it comes easy to me. And so, and that's so far, it's the opposite. That what comes easy to you is golden to somebody else. And sometimes we devalue that, or we go, well, that's, I'm not going to charge that much because I can just do this in 5 minutes. Well, there you go. You're tying your expertise back to time. You're commoditizing yourself and so forth. So there's a lot there to unpack, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
You're almost the psychologist to your clients, in a sense. But your podcast is called the Pricing is Positioning podcast. So what do you mean by that? I mean, talk about positioning.
Yeah, because that's why I love that title. When I was reading Blair Ann's book, Pricing Creativity, great book on value-based pricing, especially for agencies or marketing agencies. So if you're one of those, I recommend picking it up. But in his book, he had one term in there called pricing is positioning, and it had to do with what I talk about too, but it stuck with me. And because I was looking for a name for the podcast, and it's so true because I found this to be true over the years. And sometimes your price, most of the time you're so concerned about your price being low enough that the client will take it. Sometimes it's too low and the client won't take you serious, or will cast you off as an amateur. My friend Ken Davis from SCORE and wrote, has a movie out called Fully Alive, great book, but he talks about when he was in the faith space and he was doing a lot of work in the youth groups and so forth. And he got his first request to do a corporate event. And it's like, okay, corporate, they actually have real, money, churches and faith-based organizations tend to be on very limited budgets. And so when he got the corporate opportunity, he was like, yeah, this is awesome. So they said, yeah, they called him and they want to come down. We want you to come down and do our keynote for our annual business meeting and so forth. And they asked him what it would cost to have him do that. And he was like, I don't know, $1,000, $1,500 or something like that. And they were like, oh, I'm sorry, we only hire professionals. I mean, in their mind, they were looking for a $10,000 or $15,000 keynote speaker, not a $5,000 or a $1,500 one. So that's where pricing and positioning comes along. If I told you right now, John, hey, I have a 2021 Corvette and I'll give it to you for $5,000. What comes into your mind immediately? There's
something wrong with that thing, right?
Exactly. Something wrong with it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So same thing as a professional service provider, consultant, any kind of thing like that. If you're trying to position for those more affluent people or those higher tier clients, and your pricing's way down here at $500, when they're hiring coaches or consultants at $5,000 or $10,000, you're positioned, you're out of whack, and those people aren't going to be attracted to you because your price is too low.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you talk about hourly not being ideal, but what is it? What do you recommend, I guess, number one? And number two is how do you walk your clients through the change? If they're on hourly billing right now, pricing by time now, how do they make that change in their practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's basically what I call five high ticket consulting arrangements. And you can call them consulting or coaching or, freelancing or whatever you want to call it. I mean, but there's essentially five basic ones. And the first one is that hourly one. And so that's the first thing I have this conversation. I say, John, stop charging hourly. If I ask you what's your hourly billing rate, I want you to say you don't have one. If you ask me what mine is right now, I say I don't have one. And then you start that conversation with the clients. Well, then they'll say, well, then how do you charge? And then what I say is, well, you want to have a daily rate. You want to have a retainer, and it's a retainer for access, not a retainer like an attorney where they bill every 5 minutes you call them, but a retainer for access. And then there's project-based billing, and then there's what we call outcome or value-based billing. So I can break each one of those down for you if you want, but to answer your first part of the question is how do you transition? And so I start with that, getting away from the hourly and moving to at least a daily rate. So then what you can do is I can say, okay, don't tell your clients your hourly rate. First off, that's the first step. Don't even have one. Don't ever advertise one. Don't ever have that conversation. Move away from hourly. And even if you use hourly in the back of your mind to justify your daily rate or your project rate, just don't disclose that to your clients or make that known. It's not being dishonest. It's just you're moving away from billing for time and materials, a commodity-based arrangement, to a more of a project one. And what the great thing about this is now your clients will start to associate, I'm not paying John hourly for his services. I'm paying a project price for some great value. So I charge you charge me $1,500. I provide you a great, branding package or a logo, and it's not tied to the number of hours. It may have taken you 2 hours or 35 hours. The client doesn't care. They got a great logo and branding package for $1,500. And that's the important shift right there. Once you've made that step, now you can move up to the higher tiers. And as you do that more and get better at it, and you get more clients and you start to get some experience under your belt, then you can eventually move to what we call the value-based pricing or outcome-based. And that's where you really become a partner with your client. And you go, okay, what are you trying to achieve? Oh, we need a new website. Well, what for? Well, we want to increase revenue. By how much? Well, we want to make another $200,000 a year. Bingo. Okay. Now how can I position my services to help them achieve that $200,000? And now my fee should be closer to the value that they're getting. Let's say it's 200,000, 10% of 200,000. Boom, you got your fee, and you can really move away from the $1,500 now to the 5-figure kind of arrangements.
Sure. And you counsel your clients about the concepts of anchoring and using options. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's a great technique that we also bring into to the whole equation that helps. And this isn't something I made up or am the guru on. I mean, I know it because that was one of the things that I found working well, that I found by default. But it's based in what's called pricing psychology or behavioral economics. So if you want to go get a PhD, you can Google and YouTube all day long about that, which is what I did. Because I was like, man, why did I get that job but not this one? And I'd look back and I'd compare. And then I started reading about this. And the whole idea about anchoring, let's talk about that first, is price anchoring is, in any negotiation, the first number you see or hear anchors the value for that conversation moving forward. So I've done this in my workshops. I'll do 12-person workshops, coaching workshops, or where we work on your pricing and your consulting or building your consulting business. And what I'll do is I'll divide my workshop attendees into two. So they'll have six. I'll have 6 on the left and 6 on the right. And what I'll do is I'll give them a questionnaire. And group A, I'll just say, what do you estimate the estimated hourly rate for all consultants in this room is? And I'll just give that to them, and they'll inevitably come up with, $150, $200 an hour or something like that. Then on the other side, what I'll do is I'll ask them the same question: what is the estimated hourly rate of all consultants in the room? But before I do that, I'll set an anchor, and I'll say, do you think the average hourly rate of all consultants in this room will be greater or lower than $500 per hour? And just by setting that $500 anchor in that same question that I did in group A, group B will come in on average $1,200, $1,300, $1,000 an hour. And that's the whole premise of anchoring. It's that first number you see or hear. So most conventional negotiation thought is like, oh, you don't want to say a price until if you're the seller, you don't want to say a price because your buyer might have a higher number in their mind. And then if you're the buyer, you don't want to say a price because the seller might have a different number, and you might be leaving value on the table. That's totally bogus. What you want to do is you want to anchor it in your favor. So you either want to lowball it if you're buying, or you highball it if you're selling. Yep. And so it's that whole idea about just dropping that anchor. And so what I'll do in my clients is I'll have a discovery call. I'll say, hey guys, gals, this sounds like a great project. I really think we can work together. It's going to be in the $50,000 range. And then you just go silent and let them flop on the floor and foam at the mouth, or let them go, great, send me a proposal. Bingo, bam. You anchored them at 50,000. Maybe you were thinking it was in the 35 range or something, but anchor them a little higher. Most people will say no. They'll try to go, well, if I'm thinking it's going to be 35, but the client might only want to spend 25, so I'll come in at 20. I'll drop 20. Well, you just anchored yourself in the opposite direction. So always anchor high is the first recommendation. And even in an email with a client, yeah, this is somewhere in the 15 to 25,000 range or whatever. Just drop the high number, your higher end of what you think it's going to cost. You can always drop lower from there. And then when you use anchoring in conjunction with what we call price options. And if you look at all the big brands, Starbucks, the car wash, McDonald's with the bonus meals and everything, there's always 3 pricing options, and 3 is generally accepted as the sweet spot. There was a jelly study done many years ago regarding this, where they had 26 jellies, and the average price per jelly at a supermarket was like $7 a buy. And then when they dropped it down to only 6 jellies, it jumped up like triple, because what happens is you can have what's called choice overload. If you have too many options or too many prices, it can overload your client. So 3 options, just like you go to the car wash, you have good, better, best. Sometimes it's called Goldilocks pricing, but 3 pricing options, a low end option, a mid-range option, and then that first class VIP, Bentley version that's your high anchor. Mm-hmm. And that anchors your other options down. And more times than not, they'll buy the middle one is kind of the premise here. But anchoring and options are a very powerful, proven behavioral, economical, psychology-based pricing strategy that all the big brands do. And so we should too, as consultants and solopreneurs.
Sure. Folks, we're here chatting with Paul Klein. Paul is the host of the Pricing is Positioning podcast. Paul, talk about choice overload.
Yeah, I kind of touched on that a little bit. But, mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know about you, but the last time I went to Adobe and tried to buy something, like all I want is like Adobe Reader or Adobe Acrobat, and I just want to pay for that. They got, Dreamcatcher this, and you got to subscribe to that. And it's so dang confusing. I just give up and go find a competitor because there's too many choices. When you have too many choices, or you have choice overload, and if you're a brick and mortar, this applies to you, whether you're an internet-based business, knowledge-based business, or knowledge economy-based business, or if you're a service-based brick and mortar, roofing contractor, plumber, baker, whatever it is. If you have some type of service and you have way too many options, or even a menu board, if it has too many options, people will just shut down and they won't buy. And so it's called choice overload. So you really want to streamline that and keep it super simple for your clients, especially if you're a knowledge-based or a consultant. And that's what I've found over the years, is just providing those 3 options. Hey, here's the deliverables. Here's what you're looking for. Here's option A, which is my high anchor VIP, super deluxe Bentley version. If you don't want that, I got a mid-range option here. And if you don't want that, I got a really economic one down at the bottom. And then what I do is I'll play with my deliverables. I'll play with my payment terms, and also access to me, because time is the most valuable commodity we have, Yep. And so the lower options generally don't have as much involvement with me or direct access to me, but the first class ticket, just like on an airplane, where you get the wine and the better snacks and the extra leg room. Yep. I have those options as well.
Sure. Yeah. And you also advocate a 1-page proposal. Talk a little bit about why that is.
Same idea. It all works together. So okay. All these strategies kind of work together. So, bidding your, at least in the consulting space, I can't speak to say, if there's a baker or a, cookie maker or something out there that, I don't know that it applies to the physical products as much, but in the consulting and professional services space, absolutely. And what you do is, as you're moving away from hourly and doing more project-based proposals, you're invoking the anchoring and options that we talked about, high anchor, mid, low. And then when you present this to the client, I had been doing this for years, and it was Blair Innsbruck who also advocates for a one-page proposal. It's like, wow, that's why that makes sense. I mean, I've done the old way early on in 2010, 2009. You send the 25-page proposal with all your resumes and all your previous projects and all this fancy stuff, to try to impress the client. And what does everybody do? And I've been on the other end of this too. We flip to the very last page where the prices, the pricing sheet is, and that's all we look at. We don't care about all the fluff. So set yourself apart from everybody else. Just send in a one-page proposal with your high anchor on the left, because we read left to right. Or if it's on your web page, make your high anchor the first option you see as you're scrolling down your page, which a lot of people make that mistake. They'll put their low price first, and then when they see the higher prices, they're shocked. So start with that high priced offer first on the left side of the page or on the top of a scrolling page. Then your mid price option in the middle, and then you're on your low price option on the right. And just keep it super simple. Bullet points. You don't need to get into all the legal jargon and disqualifiers and all this at this point. It has been my experience. Keep it simple. Make it easy for the client to commit. Once they say, yeah, we like option 2. Okay, boom. Now you can send them a contract, all the legal jargon you need in your vertical or in your industry, to make it, cover your rear end and all that stuff. But don't need to do that till you got a viable client. And a lot of times what we do as consultants, coaches, freelancers is we overload our clients with all that info up front before they've even committed. And it goes back to what we talked about a minute ago, choice overload. It's like, this is too complicated. I'm going to go with this other vendor over here because it's much simpler.
Well, it strikes me that if you haven't been able to winnow down what you're offering to a client to 3 choices and in a very succinct manner, like a one-page proposal, you haven't had an effective value conversation.
Correct.
You're still guessing
yes.
at where the value is for that client, right?
Right. Exactly. And that's the thing. If you have a really good value conversation or a very in-depth discovery call with them to really find their needs, you can put those pain points and those things that are very important to your clients in those bullet points in a very simple, distinct manner. Project meetings every week on Monday, 24-hour response on phone calls and emails. If it's the low option, it's 2 weeks. Payment terms. The things that really make it easy for them to engage with you, and through that discovery or that value conversation, you can really hone in on those. Now, the more zeros my experience has been is like I typically, if it's a 6-figure bid, generally those are so in-depth conversations. I end up drilling down in that value conversation or in the discovery calls or pre-meetings or whatever. So by the time we get to that point, we're just solidifying everything. And so my experience has been, and other people may have something different, is that the higher end, the higher ticket, I guess, that's like 6 figures and above, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
If you're bidding jobs over $100,000, generally those are going to be, I find I don't generally end up using a 3-page proposal because those are much higher involved relationship building conversations. So by the time we get to that point, we already know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Whereas
4 and 5 figure projects, $15,000-$20,000 range, where it's a very repeatable product or service that you're doing, and you don't have quite as in-depth conversations. You can use the 3-page. Although I have used the 3-option single-page proposal for 6-figure projects too, and it all works. It doesn't matter how many zeros are behind there, whether you're doing a $300 project or a $300,000 project. The psychology works the same.
I love it. So let's talk specifically about how you work with clients. You're working with consultants, freelancers, coaches, solopreneurs. That's kind of your target. But how do they engage with you? What are your options you offer?
Yeah. So I have a couple things. I mean, I have the free podcast, lots of free resources out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to my webpage at paulklein.net, I have a free pricing quiz, which is tied into my hairband days, which I used to have long hair. And I know that's can be a little bit, don't want to advertise that too much down here in the South, being from California. I looked, as you know, John, I looked a little wild back in the 80s. So,
yeah. Yeah. But, you look good, man, but whatever.
It was a different time.
It was.
But hey, I was an entrepreneur, just putting on the show for the business side of it. But
there you go.
Another story for another time. But go to paulklein.net. There's a pricing quiz, and it's definitely tied into the 80s kind of rock star, and it rates you on your answer. So you take the quiz, and if if everything you answer is based on billing and you haven't invoked retainers, you're going to get a lower score. It's a great barometer. You don't even have to put your email in. I know you're supposed to have email as captures and everything, but I've found actually my conversion rates on that are better when I don't require an email. Most people want to put on it because they want to get on my email list because they like the podcast. And then from there, I have what's called the Rock Your Pricing course and community, where I've put together a great video course. It's super cheap. See, I'm anchoring myself low here, but this is more of an audience building play here. It's so it's $150. You get 20 videos. I mean, if you just watch the first module, all these things that we're talking about here, you'll 10x that in the first module alone. Once you're on there, then the whole idea is then I have one-on-one coaching that I do. And so I have a certain number of clients that I'll take on a monthly retainer.
There you go.
One of the things I teach. Yep. And it's access to me. We either meet weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, depending on which you want. And then I help you develop your consultancy. If you're getting ready to pivot, if you're out on your own and you're trying to get more value. And sometimes I have people stay with me for 1 month, all the way to 6 or 8 months or a year even. So it just depends on the particular needs for the person. And so I have a certain number of those that I do each month, and that's pretty much it in that space, because I still do have my other consultancy in the ADA space that I'm still doing. So I only take on so many of those per quarter. Gotcha.
Now your influence, your clients go well beyond Nashville, and you just moved here last year from California to Nashville, and I want to touch on that as we can here before we close. Why Nashville? What brought you to Nashville? I mean, you're part of the talent influx that's coming into Nashville right now.
Well, I appreciate that kind comment that I'm a part of the talent influx. I mean, I certainly see that trend, and that resonates, because what is the old saying? You draw from the best, and anyway, whatever it is. But I mean, we had this in plan. We were going to move. I had been traveling. Our kids, let me back up. Since 2009, my kids were really young. Three kids and a mortgage, married. Heat of the recession, and I go out on my own and create this crazy consulting business. When I had a predictable benefits, retirement, and everything. Everybody thought I was stupid. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? My wife was even like, "You're miserable in your job, but if you quit, just don't tell me." And so one day we were sitting at the table, and she was like, "Yeah, Monday, do you think you could get off work early so you can take the kids home?" I'm like, "I don't need to take any. I can take any time I want off now." So she's like, "No."
She really did want not to be told after all, right?
Yeah, she's like, and it's like, I didn't know how. I couldn't say, yeah, I got it. I checked with the boss. I got it off now. I guess that's what I should have said. Yeah. But anyway, so we wanted to, after our kids were old enough, we knew we had lived in Northern California our whole lives, both of us. We knew there was more to life than living in the same place. There's a lot of things to be said for that. And so before it became kind of, trendy to move from California due to politics or whatever it is, COVID, none of that was anyway, we had this in mind. So we started looking at a lot of different places. I travel a lot. So we spent time up in Maine. We spent time down in Austin and San Antonio, Houston, Florida, and I pretty much wherever it didn't snow, wherever the polar vortex didn't hit, that was in play for a move. And had a lot of friends down here. My friend Dan Miller from 48 Days, The Work You Love, Ken Davis, Karen Anderson from Morgan James Publishing here in Franklin, all great people, and just fell in love with the area after coming here for seminars and workshops and stuff. And it just kind of developed over about 2 or 3 years. And I love the business climate. I love the music industry, the entrepreneurial spirit, the freedom of business that there is here. It's so much different than California. I mean, I formed an LLC here, and boy, it was so much easier than where I was before. There was so much red tape, and it was like there's so much there were so many things, what's the word? Trying to tell you not to do a business. Whereas here it was like, hey, yeah, it's just amazing. It's just amazing. The people, the community is just so much more entrepreneurial in business. And I just love that about Nashville, and the history and the culture is just awesome here.
That's great. That's great. Paul Klein, folks. He's, the Pricing is Positioning podcast is his show. But if you are a consultant, coach, and pricing is your problem, have you ever had a consultant or coach come to you and say, I don't have a problem with pricing? Have you ever had one say,
yeah, I have.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah.
But it's a distinct minority, right? It's the biggest problem most of them have, right? Yeah. Yeah. So folks, if you've got that problem, if you've got that issue, here's your guy, Paul Klein. Paul, this has been great. It's been a pleasure having you on. But we got to get to the most important question, which is those that have heard something that makes them want to be in touch. They want to sign up for your course or maybe some, a discovery call with you. Tell them how they can connect.
Yeah, everything's available at paulklein.net. It's like Calvin Klein, Klein, or you can just Google Pricing is Positioning. I should come up. But yeah, everything's at paulklein.net, and my email's on there, and you can find all the information there. And love to connect with you there on if I've sparked some interest and you think we might be a good fit, and you need some help with your pricing or coaching, consulting, you're going into out on your own, and you just want to have someone to bounce that off of, definitely willing to help you out there.
Great stuff. Paul Klein, folks. Paul, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for being with us. Thank you. It's an honor to be here, John. Thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you. And folks, just a quick reminder, Paul's got a Are You a Rockstar Pricer quiz. We'll have a link to that into the show notes, so you can go find that and check that out as well. So, folks, this has been our first episode of Nashville Business Radio. We're excited. We're excited about opening up in Nashville as well. If you want to know more about the Business RadioX network and our 25 studios across the country, go to businessradiox.com. And if you want to find out more information on our Nashville studio, go to nashvillebusinessradiox.com, and you'll find our info there. So for my guest, Paul Klein, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on Nashville Business Radio.